Committee has already been selected previously, so the influence from below is strictly limited. Then further on, the Central Committee formally then elects the Politburo and the Standing Committee, which is the central power of the Chinese Communist Party. And I also saw on the news regarding this Congress that there has been a change when it comes to the election process, where previously in the last two Congresses there have been an ingredients of inner party democracy. There has been some kind of selection process. This apparently has been reduced for this Congress. We are not sure exactly in what way this the influence of the election was reduced, because Xinhua didn't really reveal the details of that. But that's one aspect of a change of the recent Congress. Now, this Congress is also important, you can say, for the last 20-25 years. There have been forms of this Congress that have been institutionalized in a very important way, that essentially form a kind of rule-based decision-making process in China, which is really important. We're going to come back to that problem, how important it is for a system like China to have institutionalized rules to making decisions and to appointing political leaders. And this is why there's been a lot of talk about to what extent these informal norms and rules of the party will be followed by Xi Jinping and others. And this is something that we will then come back to.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the panel wants to compliment what we heard from Oscar?
I think Mr. Oscar knows a lot about the Congress. First of all, that's difficult, especially for a friend. But I'm afraid I have to point out that there are some mistakes, maybe. First of all, it's about the election of the Central Committee members. It's not pre-decided. This is an election process. The delegates vote their ballots. And of course, there are a recommendation list. But the list is much more, the number is much bigger than the people got elected. So, and there are some people maybe not in the list can be elected to the committee. So the committee the Congress delegates have a full democratic rights to vote for their own candidate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question for the panel would be: what are the key outcomes, in your view, of the Congress? Christina, would you like to start off?
I think that one of the key outcomes is that we still do not know who will come after Xi Jinping. We also have seen that to Xi Jinping, I think it was quite a successful party congress. He manifested his power, you can say, and but he didn't overdo it. He still allowed other factions to have their members. So that's one of the things. I mean, we could go on. Maybe somebody else want to continue?
Nora, perhaps.
Certainly. I mean, my background being more from the military side or the security side, perhaps I can focus on a few of those takeaways. Certainly from that standpoint, I think there's a great deal of continuity for some of the developments that China was already engaging in. Certainly within the discussion, as we heard from the comments earlier from the ambassador, the focus is still on development, peaceful rise, and peaceful integration into the larger community. And yet at the same time, a big component of this, of course, is being able to protect sea lines of communication, economic interests abroad, civilians abroad. And so as part of that, we really can't leave out the military role in all of this. And it's not just about the tactical side. I think from a strategic perspective as well, if you look at the speech from Xi Jinping, he mentioned great power, strong power 26 times, which was actually an increase from previous leaders within China. He advocated a modern army, navy, air force, rocket force, and strategic support force So within all of this, I would really emphasize 3 areas that I think points to continuity. The first of these has to do with the organization of the military and how that plays into this larger development goal. The second is technology, and the third is projection. In terms of organization, China has sought to build up coordination and joint operations, certainly through its theater commands, which they've actually reduced in number from 7 to 5 over the past few years. If you saw within the Party Congress the new list of the Central Military Commission members, they've also shrunken or decreased from 11 to 7. Now this marks a larger streamlining that I think is occurring throughout all levels of government, but particularly within the military as well. And certainly within this, there is this concept of ideological indoctrination and regulation. The Department of Discipline Inspection has been elevated above the Equipment and Logistics Department. We see individuals like General Wei Fenghe, who has served as the commander of PLA's rocket force, being looked at potentially as the new Minister of Defense. That still remains to be seen. And so that's where you have some continuity. Where it's starting to lack continuity is perhaps that within this shakeup, we have seen a number of generals within the anti-corruption drive start to be taken down. We've seen General Xu Caiho, who was the former vice chairman of the CMC, and others who are under investigation, like General Fang Fenghui. Also, 4 service heads and the commanders of 3 of 5 of the military theater commands have been replaced. We've seen 9 of 15 departments as well have changes. So there is some shakeup going on within, certainly the leadership within the military. But all of this points to a consolidation, streamlining under the party. In terms of technology, from 2015, China established the Strategic Support Force to oversee military operations in space, cyber, electromagnetic, and information domains. And this was pointed as an area of development, certainly by the ambassador, for developing not just the military, but also the economic growth of the country at large. Younger military leaders with greater familiarity with technology and modern military thought are being promoted through the ranks. And in fact, according to some estimates, an estimated 87% of the military delegates to the Party Congress were first-timers. So in other words, they had not been to previous Party Congresses. And Chairman Xi Jinping pointed to this in pointing to the idea of strength in technology, quality, aerospace, cyberspace, and transportation, and creating a digital China. So I think these are some of the trends that we will see in the future that once again flows into the economic development of the country, R&D, joint technological development. Finally, I mentioned projection. Feeding into these development aims, the PLA Navy is to expand its presence abroad to protect military supply ports, channels, and civilian personnel stationed abroad. This has already been marked by the establishment of China's first overseas military base in Djibouti and expansion of its peacekeeping forces to 8,000. And as we heard earlier, I think that there is, and I'm saying this in part as an American, I think there is this implicit reference being made to the United States when we talk about hegemony, not interfering in the activities or the internal affairs of other countries. And I'd like to highlight in Chairman Xi Jinping's quote, China's development does not pose a threat to any other country. No matter what stage of development it reaches, China will never seek hegemony or engage in expansion. That being said, he also stated that a military is built to fight. All military works must adhere to the standards of being able to fight a war and to win a war. This actually points to the question that came from our audience earlier. So this shows that the emphasis is, of course, on sea lines of communication, commerce abroad, and some of these points that have been made earlier. But it's also to ensure domestic integrity and territorial sovereignty, and that will impinge upon other issues that will no doubt be a subject of today, which is South China Sea, Taiwan, among others.
Okay. Christina, you wanted to comment something?
No, but I feel like maybe I should say something about the economic, because that's what I'm looking more at.
Yes.
So one of the things that was highlighted during this Party Congress was also to continue with the economic reforms, and we will most likely see more of the economic reforms in the third plenum that comes up within a year. And to me, I see that China continues on its way going forward They say that we're going to liberalize the economy, but there are many things that are not happening. And but because they still say that we will focus on state-owned enterprises, will still remain in charge of vital areas, for example, energy parts and so on. And Xi Jinping also said in his speech that that they want to open up China for more foreign direct investments. But I think that many foreign companies are now a little bit wary because China has been going out so much, investing abroad, and China is not. We are giving China a lot of market access, but China is not giving as much market access to foreign companies as we are doing in the West. So that is a problem. So I see when he speaks about all these things, as the ambassador also mentioned, to fight against poverty and to alleviate income gaps and so on, and to develop the country because there are still many parts which are really poor. I think that that is really, I mean, it's not something that is new for Xi Jinping or any Chinese Communist leader to say. But also we have to look beyond the words. What is really happening? Because there is one thing saying that we should close down the steel mills that are generating overcapacity, but does Xi Jinping really have the power to close them down? Hasn't managed to close down so many steel mills during the last 5 years, and it's quite hard job because there is local resistance and so on. So those are some of my...
Well, the conclusion is, of course, that's a lot of work ahead, and we have to follow these developments very, very closely to see what is behind the words and what actually will take place. Oscar, you want to comment on?
Yeah, just shortly then. I think as a takeaway point, the last 5 years that has been going on under Xi Jinping, I've been increasingly worried about the concentration of political power and the centralization of power, which I think, not from a typically Western, democratic point of view, but because I think it's bad for stability in China, and I think to concentrate too much power in the hand of one person isn't good for China or for the Communist Party either. So I had pretty negative expectations of this Congress in terms of what was going to happen, what was going to happen, and to what extent Xi Jinping would follow these norms that I was talking about before. And I must say that I'm a bit positively surprised that they turn out to not be as norm-breaking as I was fearing. Well, he did break some of those rules and norms. But he also did follow some, and I think that the setup of the Standing Committee of the Politburo seems quite interesting, actually. So I have a less negative view now than I had before the Congress, I would say.
Mr. Lee, would you like to comment what your colleagues, your panel colleagues, referring to the military, to the trade?
I have to.
I suppose so too. I think we're eagerly waiting for your comments.
First of all, just now, Ambassador Gui has made a quite good introduction. All the main message is there. I can add some of my personal observations. For me, I think the most important message from this Congress is the Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. What does this mean? This means now China, after a long period of efforts, we have entered into a new era. That is, we are closer to the realization of our 2 centenary goals. The first goal is to become to build a prosperous, moderately prosperous society in all aspects. And the second goal is to basically realize the modernization. From now on until the next Party Congress, this is the time frame for the realization of the goals. We are definite and we are very confident that at that time the goal will be achieved. To achieve this new goal, these centenary goals, we need a new new posture, new style, and more efforts. For example, people, Madam next to me talked about the defense policy. In the next 5 years, I'm sure the Chinese military will grow even stronger and more ready to fight. And but our defense policy is the same. That is defensive policy. Military is always the last resort to solve the problem. And unless China's security, territorial integrity is seriously under threat, after all diplomatic political means, we reserve the right to fight for our country, to fight for our people. For example, if some people tries to separate Taiwan from China as the last resort, well, God forbid, military means will be used. But I'm very confident that the cross-strait relations will maintain the peace and development direction. So I'm not sure whether I answered your question. Just like Ambassador said about the interference of land interference of internal affairs. As for the rule-based governance or the law-based governance, this principle is applied both to the party and to the government. No one is above the law. We all should follow the rules. I'm sure the re-election of President Xi Jinping as Central Secretary is the consensus of the party delegates and reflects the consensus of the Chinese people. And all other members of the standing committee are also elected by the people. If you follow the news after the election, Chinese people wholeheartedly supported them. As for who will be the next leader, and well, that is $1 billion question. If you can get it right now, then you will get this very soon. We'll find the new leader, but I'm afraid it's not possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When in the keynote speech,